sealed for centuries, untouched and undisturbed. Tombs are meant to be final resting places, but what happens when those graves are opened? Some reveal eerie relics of forgotten civilizations, while others expose secrets no one was meant to find. Imagine stepping into a crypt in Italy, only to lock eyes with rows of eerily preserved corpses. What other chilling spectacles lurk beneath the earth? Join us. Let's uncover the most horrifying things ever found in tombs.
Are we looking at the traces of a forgotten episode in human history? I think so. I think that's what's going on here.
Number 11. Tomb of Gilgamesh. It started as an ordinary excavation. Then the story disappeared, just like the people who discovered it. In 2003, a team of German archaeologists working in Iraq uncovered something astonishing, something they believed could be the long-lost tomb of King Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is the central figure in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written works in human history. For years, historians debated whether he was a real person or just a legend. The epic describes him as a 17-foot-tall giant, part human and part Mesopotamian goddess. Many dismissed him as pure myth, but then Jorg Fassbinder and his team used modern technology to scan beneath the desert, and what they found changed everything. Buried beneath the sand was an entire ancient city, perfectly matching the descriptions in the epic. There were houses, gardens, fields, and an advanced canal system. Even more intriguing, the layout suggested a tomb that seemed eerily similar to the one described in the ancient text. Could this really be the resting place of a king thought to be a legend? If so, what would they find inside? The discovery had the potential to rewrite history. Scientists were excited, hoping to uncover answers about one of humanity's oldest civilizations. But just as quickly as the tomb was found, everything came to a halt. A few weeks after the site was uncovered, the United States invasion of Iraq began.
White horses, brown horse, stand by to copy.
Line Sierra, 2-0 personnel. Line Alpha, patrolling what appears to be a headquarters, break. Line Lima, 3-8 Sierra.
The country was thrown into chaos, and Fassbinder's team was forced to leave. What could have been one of the greatest archaeological breakthroughs was suddenly out of reach. That is when things got even stranger. As United States forces moved into Iraq, reports surfaced that the military had set up a base directly around the Gilgamesh site. Journalists, including those from ABC News and the BBC, were among the first to report on the discovery. But soon after, the story vanished. News reports on the tomb were taken off the air, and scientists were sent home. Then came accounts from locals who claimed they saw United States forces digging at the site. What exactly were they looking for? Was it just an ordinary excavation? Or had they found something they did not want the world to see? To this day, no official explanation has been given. The site remains in military-controlled territory, and the mystery of Gilgamesh's tomb remains unsolved. If the epic was right about the tomb, could it have been right about something else? Could there have been something buried with Gilgamesh that made the discovery too important to be shared with the world? No one knows for sure. But one thing is clear. What started as a groundbreaking discovery quickly became a mystery that may never be solved. Number 10. The first evidence of twin mortality. They were digging near an old railway site in Russia when they found something unexpected. It was 1997 and workers uncovered a burial site dating back 7,000 to 8,000 years. Inside were the remains of at least 100 people. A discovery like this was rare. Most hunter-gatherers didn't bury their dead in one place. But there was something even more unusual. Among the skeletons, researchers found a woman who had died in childbirth. That alone was interesting. But what they found next was even more surprising. Between her legs were the tiny bones of an infant. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, as they studied the remains, they realized something strange. There weren't just two tiny arms. There were four legs, two skulls. This wasn't just one baby. She had been carrying twins. Scientists believe this could be the oldest known case of twins in history. It might also be the earliest evidence of death caused by obstructed labor. Number 9. The Košice Massacre. A peaceful village, a normal day, and then sudden, brutal violence. That is what researchers believe happened near the Polish village of Kościce about 5,000 years ago. In 2011, archaeologists uncovered a mass grave, and at first, it seemed like just another ancient massacre. But when experts looked closer, they found something unusual. The grave held 15 people. This included men, women, and children who were all killed by blows to the skull. But unlike most mass burials from that time, these bodies weren't tossed in carelessly. They appeared to have been placed with respect. Each of the 4 mothers was buried beside her own children. Grave goods were arranged carefully around them. Whoever laid them to rest knew exactly who they were. DNA tests confirmed that the victims were all part of the same extended family. Most of the men were missing, except for a few who were either very young or very old. This detail gave researchers a theory. The strongest men, likely the fathers, had probably left for the day. Maybe they were hunting or trading. Whatever the reason, their absence gave the attackers the perfect opportunity. When the men returned, they would have walked into a nightmare. Their families were gone and their village was destroyed. But the biggest question remains: why did this happen? The true reason may never be known, but experts think it could have been the result of a violent conflict. This group was part of the globular amphora culture, which had been clashing with the corded ware people at the time. What makes this grave so different isn't just the brutality of the attack. It is the care shown in the burial. Someone returned to make sure these mothers and children were laid to rest properly. Even after such a violent end, they weren't forgotten. Number 8. The bones of the shaman. 12,000 years ago, a respected woman passed away. After a carefully planned burial, her body was laid to rest inside a deep cave. The woman was around 45 when she died. Her remains were discovered in a cave called Hilazon Taktid in northern Israel. This discovery was made in 2005. In the same cave, archaeologists found 28 other skeletons, but her bones stood out among them. Many experts believe that she held the role of a shaman. They arrived at this idea after noticing many animal bones near her remains. It was said that shamans could commune with animal spirits. This belief made her one of the most important people in her tribe. After years of careful research, experts were able to piece together the funeral ritual that took place. They looked at unusual objects and animal remains found at the burial site to understand each step of the ceremony. They explained that she received a 6-stage burial. The ritual started with preparing her tomb in the cave. The area was then decorated with animal remains and other objects. Each step of the process was important and had meaning for those who carried it out. At the time of her burial, her body, which stood at about 4 feet 9 inches tall, was placed with great care in a grave pit. This pit was decorated with several items. There was sediment, seashells, and tortoise shells. The layers also included chalk and bony horn cores from gazelles. Around and on top of her body, experts found bones from several animals. Among these were skulls from martens, a tail from a wild cow, a forearm from a boar, a pelvis from a leopard, a wing from an eagle, and even a human foot. There was also a large collection of tortoise shells, with 86 in total. The tortoise shells were part of a ritual meal. Experts believe that during this meal, those attending the funeral ate a large amount of meat, about 55 pounds in total. The shells represented the animals that were consumed as part of the celebration. Finally, after all the rituals were complete, a stone was placed to separate her from the other bodies in the cave. Number 7. Birdman. Imagine being buried with a collar made entirely of bird beaks and skulls. That is exactly what archaeologists found in 2019 when they unearthed a grave in Siberia's Novosibirsk region. The skeleton was about 5,000 years old, dating back to the Bronze Age. Siberia has revealed many ancient burials, but this one stood out. The man's remains were discovered with a garment no one had seen before. A collar made from an estimated 50 bird skulls and beaks was wrapped around his neck. It earned him the nickname Birdman. Experts weren't sure what it meant. Some believed it could have been armor, meant to protect his chest. Others thought it might have been part of a ritual. Maybe it was even a fashion choice. There was also a chance the collar wasn't worn that way at all. It could have been a headdress instead. But Birdman wasn't buried alone. Nearby, archaeologists found another grave with a wooden partition inside. The top section held 2 children, who were approximately 5 and 10 years old when they died. The lower section contained a man who had been laid to rest with a bronze mask covering his face. That detail made things even more mysterious. The mask and bird collar were unusual enough on their own, but the fact that both were found in the same burial site raised questions. Some experts think the two men might have been shamans, people who held special spiritual roles in their communities. If that's true, then this discovery could reveal something important about ancient beliefs and rituals. Number 6. Bones of newborns. Archaeologists never know what they will find when they start digging, but in 1988, a team in Ashkelon, Israel, uncovered something truly disturbing: a pit filled with infant skeletons. The discovery was made in an old sewer beneath a Roman bathhouse near the Mediterranean coast. At first, they thought they were looking at tiny animal bones, maybe from chickens. But as they examined the remains more closely, the truth became clear. What they had found was a mass grave, holding the tiny bones of nearly 100 newborns. Tests revealed that these babies had all died within their first week of life. They hadn't been sick or born with defects. Someone had abandoned them in the sewer, likely right after birth. No burial, no care, just discarded. A shocking detail emerged from DNA testing. Most of the infants were male. In many ancient cultures, male children were considered more valuable, making this finding even stranger. If boys were usually preferred, why were so many abandoned here? One theory suggests these were the children of prostitutes working in the bathhouse above. It is possible these women felt they had no choice but to get rid of their newborns. Maybe they were forced to. Maybe they believed they couldn't raise them. But even then, why were the girls seemingly spared? Some historians have suggested they might have been kept alive and raised to work in the bathhouse. In ancient Rome, babies were not considered fully human right away. A newborn wasn't officially part of the family until a naming ceremony about a week after birth. Until then, an infant's life was seen as disposable. If a child was unwanted, there was no punishment for getting rid of it. That cruel belief may explain why so many newborns were tossed into the sewer without hesitation. But even with that knowledge, the discovery of so many tiny bones in one place is hard to comprehend. Now, it is time for today's subscriber's pick. This image looks like something straight out of a nightmare. On the left, there's a massive crowd of bald figures, all facing a towering stone structure. The way their heads are arranged makes it feel like they are part of something ancient, and not in a good way. It almost feels like a forgotten ritual, something that was never meant to be seen. On the right side, things get even creepier. Two soldiers sit in a dark cave, staring at something that shouldn't exist. A skeleton-like figure with twisted horns and outstretched arms, frozen in time. Could this be a supernatural being? A guardian of a lost civilization? Whatever it is, this would definitely be one of the most horrifying things found in tombs. It makes you wonder, what else is hidden beneath the earth, waiting to be discovered? And if this thing was locked away, was it to keep people out or to keep it in? What do you think? Would you ever explore a hidden tomb knowing something like this might be inside? Number 5. The Venetian vampire. Some graves hold more than just bones. They hold fear, superstition, and dark beliefs. In 2006, archaeologists on the Venetian island of Lazaretto Nuovo found a woman's remains in a plague mass grave. But there was something strange about her. A brick had been forced into her mouth. This wasn't some accident or random burial practice. It was a sign of fear. In the 16th century, when the plague was wiping out entire communities, people weren't just afraid of disease. They were afraid of what came after. Some believed the dead could return as vampires, spreading sickness even after burial. And this woman? Someone thought she was one of them. Back then, the sight of decaying bodies only made the fear worse. Corpses swelled up, blood leaked from their mouths, and to terrified villagers, it looked like they had been feasting in their graves. These shroud eaters, as they were called, were believed to chew through their burial cloth and rise again. The solution? Force an object, like a brick, into the mouth to stop them. The state of the woman's remains shows just how far people would go when gripped by fear. Instead of seeing sickness for what it was, they blamed the supernatural. Science and medicine were not advanced enough to explain the horrors of the plague, so they turned to folklore. This so-called Venetian vampire was likely just another plague victim, but in death, she became something more. Number 4. The Screaming Mummy. Archaeologists thought they had seen it all, but nothing quite prepared them for what they found in a tomb near Luxor, Egypt. In 1935, a team from the Metropolitan Museum of New York was excavating the burial site of Senmut, an architect who served Pharaoh Hatshepsut. Inside the chamber meant for Senmut's mother, they found another mummy. And it stood out in the most unsettling way. The woman, draped in a black wig and adorned with 2 scarab-shaped rings, had an expression frozen in what looked like eternal agony. People started calling her the Screaming Woman. Her face, twisted in what seemed like a silent wail, raised countless questions. Who was she? Why was she buried there? And most of all, what could have caused her haunting expression? For decades, the mystery remained, but with modern technology, researchers finally started piecing together the story. Scans and microscopic studies revealed something unusual. The woman might have suffered from a rare muscle reaction at the time of death, and this had caused her facial muscles to stiffen in that horrifying way. Rigor mortis was one possibility, but another condition, cadaveric spasm, could have been responsible. It is a rare phenomenon that happens when someone experiences extreme stress or trauma right before death. Scientists were able to learn more about her than just the way she died. A virtual dissection showed that she had been around 48 years old when she passed. She was about 5 feet tall and had mild arthritis. But the biggest surprise wasn't her age or health. It was what was still inside her body. Unlike most mummies from the New Kingdom, her organs had not been removed. Usually, embalmers would take out everything except the heart. But she still had her brain, lungs, liver, kidneys, and even her intestines. There was no incision to suggest they had ever been taken out. That detail alone set her apart. At first, this might seem like a sign of a rushed or careless burial, but the rest of the findings told a different story. Whoever prepared her body used high-quality materials. Her skin had been treated with expensive substances like juniper and frankincense. These were luxuries reserved for wealthy and important people. Due to this, researchers were left with one last puzzle. If she had been buried with such care, why was her mouth left open? Normally, embalmers would wrap the jaw shut to prevent the face from contorting. Yet, she was left in a state that made her look as if she had died screaming. Was it an accident? A forgotten step in the process? Or was there something more to her death and burial than anyone realized? Her identity is still unknown, and the circumstances of her death remain a mystery. But one thing is certain: 3,500 years later, her face continues to tell a story, even if no one knows exactly what it means. Number 3. The Children of Lulailaco. At the top of a freezing volcano in Argentina, archaeologists made a haunting discovery in 1999. Near the summit of Lulailaco, more than 6,700 meters above sea level, they found 3 mummified children entombed in a shrine. The remains belonged to a 13-year-old girl and 2 younger children, a boy and a girl, who were around 4 or 5 years old. Tests showed they had been buried about 500 years ago, during the height of the Inca Empire. They had not died of natural causes, but had been sacrificed in a ritual called Capuchin. Researchers were stunned by the condition of the mummies. Their bodies were so well preserved that some experts described them as looking like they had just fallen asleep. Their skin, hair, and even their clothing remained almost untouched by time. To learn more, scientists analyzed their hair. They found traces of alcohol and coca leaves, the same plant used to make cocaine. These substances were considered sacred by the Incas and were usually reserved for the elite. They were also used in important ceremonies. The teenage girl, called the Lulailaco Maiden, revealed the most clues. Her long hair provided a timeline of her final year. Around 12 months before her death, her coca consumption increased sharply. Experts believe this was when she was chosen for sacrifice. Her diet also changed. Before, she had eaten a simple potato-based diet which was common among peasants. But once she was selected, she was given richer foods like meat and maize, which was something typically eaten by the nobility. Historians say that the Incas had people who searched for young girls to take from their families. They often looked for those who were considered beautiful or special in some way. These girls were then brought to the empire's capital, where they were prepared for rituals like Capuchin. In the months leading up to her death, the Lulailico maiden consumed more and more alcohol. By the final weeks, the amount was so high that experts believe she was heavily sedated when she was taken to the mountain. It is believed that after being placed in the tomb, the combination of alcohol, high altitude, and extreme cold caused her to slip into unconsciousness before passing away. Today, the mummies are kept at the Museum of High Altitude Archaeology in Salta, Argentina. They remain some of the best preserved Inca mummies ever found. Number 2. The Capuchin Catacombs of Palermo hold. Beneath the streets of Palermo, there is a place where time seems frozen. Walk through its dim corridors, and you will see rows of silent figures, dressed in clothes from centuries past. Some look like they could wake up at any moment. The Capuchin Catacombs of Palermo hold thousands of preserved bodies. Located in Sicily, Italy, this underground burial site has become a strange tourist attraction and an important piece of history. It all started in the late 15th century when the Capuchin monastery ran out of space in its cemetery. The monks began digging beneath their building, creating a network of crypts. In 1599, they mummified one of their own, Brother Silvestro of Gubbio, and placed him there. The mummification process was unusual. Bodies were dried out on ceramic racks deep in the catacombs. Some were later washed with vinegar. Others were embalmed or sealed in glass cabinets. The friars were left in their robes, sometimes even with the ropes they had worn as part of their religious practices. At first, only monks were allowed to be buried there. Over time, being laid to rest in the catacombs became a sign of wealth and status. People left instructions in their wills, requesting to be dressed in certain outfits or even to have their clothing changed regularly after death. Priests were buried in their ceremonial robes, while others wore outfits that reflected the fashion of their time. Families would visit, offering prayers and making sure their loved ones still looked presentable. The upkeep of the catacombs depended on donations. Each new body was placed in a temporary niche before being moved to a permanent spot. As long as families continued to pay, the body remained in its assigned place. If the payment stopped, the remains were moved to a shelf until donations resumed. Today, around 8,000 bodies rest in the catacombs. Along the walls, you will find 1,252 mummies, some posed as if frozen in time. The halls are divided into sections: men, women, children, priests, monks, and even professionals. Some bodies are better preserved than others. Some still have detailed facial features, while others are little more than skeletons draped in clothing. In 1871, Brother Ricardo became the last monk to be buried there. Even after that, a few well-known people were still interred. The catacombs were officially closed in 1880, but visitors kept coming. The final burials took place in the early 1900s. One of the most famous is Rosalia Lombardo, a nearly 2-year-old girl whose body is still incredibly well preserved. She looks as if she is only sleeping, thanks to a special embalming technique by Professor Alfredo Salafia. Walking through the catacombs is like stepping into another era. The cool, stale air, the dim lighting, and the quiet figures lined against the walls create an eerie experience. The Capuchin Catacombs remain a haunting yet fascinating part of Palermo's history. Number 1. Some discoveries happen by accident, and this one was no different. In 1974, a group of farmers in China were digging a well when they stumbled upon something unusual: ceramic figures buried underground. They had no idea that their shovels had just uncovered one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. What started as a simple well quickly became a national sensation. Archaeologists arrived and uncovered 3 massive underground chambers filled with shattered remains of life-size terracotta warriors. These were not ordinary statues. Each figure was crafted with remarkable detail, from their armor to their facial expressions, and some still had traces of their original paint when they were first unearthed. No one had ever seen anything like them before, but that was just the beginning. The warriors were only a small part of something much bigger: the vast tomb complex of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. As more of the site was excavated, the scale of the discovery became clear. Nearly 7,000 terracotta statues had been buried alongside the emperor, possibly as many as 8,000. Apart from the soldiers, there were also horses, battle chariots, government officials, entertainers, and even acrobats. Everything seemed to be placed there to serve the emperor in the afterlife, just as they had in life. Qin Shi Huang's rule was as ambitious as his burial plans. He unified China, built roads, standardized currency, and even started construction on what would later become the Great Wall. But despite all his accomplishments, he feared one thing above all, and this was death. His obsession with immortality drove him to seek out a legendary elixir, one that would grant him eternal life. He sent expeditions in search of a mythical mountain where immortals were said to live, hoping they held the secret to defeating death. But his search didn't end with ancient legends. He took matters into his own hands, regularly consuming an elixir that was supposed to extend his life. The problem? It contained mercury. Historians believe that this so-called cure is what ultimately led to his downfall. Mercury poisoning would have slowly destroyed his nervous system, causing severe brain and organ damage. Instead of gaining immortality, the emperor may have unknowingly shortened his own life. After his death, Qin Shi Huang was laid to rest in a grand mausoleum, a massive project that had been in the works since he first took the throne. Located in present-day Xi'an, the tomb took 38 years to complete and required the labor of 700,000 workers. The centerpiece of the site is a 76-meter-tall burial mound, shaped like a pyramid with its top cut off. Over time, erosion has reduced its height to 47 meters, but the structure remains a mystery. Unlike the pits filled with terracotta warriors, the emperor's actual tomb has never been opened. Archaeologists have been reluctant to excavate the burial chamber beneath the mound. The concern is not just about damaging the structure, it is about what is inside. If exposed to air, changes in temperature and humidity could cause rapid decay. Bacteria, fungi, and pollutants could destroy artifacts that have been sealed away for over 2,000 years. For now, the tomb remains untouched, its secrets still buried beneath the earth. What lies inside? Precious treasures, more statues, or something even more unexpected? Until the day it's finally explored, the final resting place of China's first emperor will remain one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.